pop into the folder called Filter Gallery and Compositing, and you'll find two pictures in there, oculus and person. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to play around first off with the filter gallery. At one of the other schools I teach at, the assignment that I've given you guys for the photographs is called Trapped in a Painting, and they have to put themselves into a painting. And sometimes they have to try to match up things like brush strokes. And if you guys want to do a painting as well, that would be fine. I would suggest going for like a Dutch master or something photorealistic, not a Picasso. But let's take a look at the filter gallery. Now first off, she's got a layer mask. If you shift click on the layer mask, if you hold down the shift key and click on the layer mask, you'll notice this little red X appears and it's disabled. So right now, she still has all of her background pixels. All the information is still there. Be careful when you're applying things like filters, because that background information that still exists can get caught up in the foreground information, depending on how that filter gets applied. If you find, let's say you're doing like a brush strokes filter or something, and maybe something that was going on in the background is getting filtered right into their head, what could we do to get rid of the background on this layer? To delete all those background pixels? Watch this. If I right click on the layer mask, I can choose Apply Layer Mask, and watch what happens. The layer mask disappears, and so do the background pixels. So now the only thing that's left on this image is the original image information. The background is gone. So whatever was revealed by the layer mask is still there. All the background is gone. So let's take a look at the filter gallery. We can find it under Filter and Filter Gallery. Now the image is very large. You may need to scroll around to see it. And most of the filters in the filter gallery are what we call, in Photoshop, wretchedly tacky. In fact, there's a whole folder called artistic, and typically the word filter and artistic I find don't go together. Just like on your phones, you'll have like Instagram and all these things that have creative filters. Again, creative and filters, in my mind, don't coexist. But let's just go through some of them anyway. There's some really basic ones like colored pencil, makes it look as though it was sketched with a colored pencil. And most of them you'll find have some different options over here. Like right now the paper that you sketched on is kind of a gray. You can make the paper black. You can make the paper white. You can play around with how hard the pencil was pressing, how wide the tip of the pencil was. You can have a really sharp pencil. You can have a really dull colored pencil. And if you just kind of look through some of them, you can see all the different effects that they have. And all of them have their own settings. I'm not going to go through everything. And again, there's a bunch of different folders. You've got things like brush strokes. There's a nice little crosshatch brush stroke, spatter, sumi-e, which I have no idea what that even means. Some of them you may find take a long time to process. See this blue line in the corner? That's it processing out the effect. Some of them are very processor intensive. Then you get into things like distort, which some of these can actually be kind of interesting. Like maybe you wanted to make it look like the photograph was taken through a shower door. That distort will give it that kind of rippled sort of look. In the sketch, you can make it look like it was sketched out with a charcoal pencil there. And again, the assignment where they're adding themselves to a painting, I've had students that do things like a comic book style. One of the students added himself to a comic book panel with Daredevil. They were sitting on a building eating a sandwich together. So this is just a way that if you were trying to match a painting, you can kind of play around with some of these effects here. Now there is one in here, where is it? That'll add film grain. There it is. It's called film grain. So if you did want to play around with adding grain to an image and simply adding the noise wasn't working for you, you can go into different types of grain. You can play around with how intense the grain is. You can play around with how much of the highlight remains, how much of it becomes grain added, the size of the grain, the amount. And you can combine these effects. You notice over here we have an eyeball on film grain. I could make a new filter layer, so I could combine the film grain. And if I make a new layer, I could add grain and poster edges or whatever. And you can have as many of these as you want. I could throw a charcoal over top of it. Now I've got film grain and dry brush and charcoal. Now, let's say that this image, we're going to add it to that oculus, and we're going to replace the peacock here. We're going to put her here looking down as though she's one of these people in the painting. Let's give that a try. So make sure you get rid of the layer mask on here. And the reason for that will become obvious once we start trying to blend her in. So pop over to this layer here, and how can we get her into that oculus image? Yeah, we can duplicate her over. So if we right-click on the name Layer 0, or go to the little pop-up here on the Layers panel, we can choose Duplicate Layer, and maybe we'll call it Person. And for the destination, here's the trick. If we choose oculus.psd, that's the other document, that's where we want her to go. When we hit OK, looks like nothing happened over here. But if we pop over to the Oculus image, there she is. Wait a minute, where is she? She's there, you guys see her? Oh, she's huge. Okay, we're gonna have to scale that down. I'm just gonna grab the Move tool and pull her back into the image here. And I'm gonna resize her, because clearly she's a little bit too large for that image. So I'll just do a Command T. And if you can't see the edges when you do the Command T, if you hit F on the keyboard, it'll take you into full screen mode, and then it'll let you over scroll. So you can actually go around and you can see the corners there. And when I shrink her down, again, if I simply hit a corner, and even if I hold Shift, she's gonna go right out of the frame there. If you want her to expand inwards toward the center of rotation there, that center point, if you hold Option, she shrinks in towards the center there. And the nice thing about using the free transform, I didn't go under Edit Transform Scale, because that would only let me scale. If you do free transform or Command T, it combines scale and rotate. So I'm going to shrink her down so she fits into that area where the peacock was. I'm also going to use the other people in the image as a rough guide for scale. And I want it to look like these fingers are kind of peeking over the edge here. Now here's where it becomes important that we got rid of that layer mask. So once you've got her rotated and scaled and aligned so it looks like she's actually there, let's give her a new layer mask. And with this new layer mask, we can hide parts of the image. Like I'm going to hide this part of her wrist here. So this kind of looks like her hand's leaning over the edge there. Now, this edge curves, and I don't know where it curves to. It's not a bad idea, if you're not sure where the edge is going to go, to hide more than you think you need. If I start hiding across here, oh, there's that sky. Now I can simply hit X on the keyboard to get some white paint, and I can reveal that wrist until it looks like it just drops down behind that ledge. And same deal here. I'll just hide more than I think I need, and then go back and clean it up later. Except I won't cut her thumb off because she won't like that. Remember, choose an appropriately sized brush that matches the hardness of the edge. Again, it's not going to be a perfect match just yet. We're going to have to play around with some stuff to make it look like she's actually there. And you'll notice I made it look like her hand is going behind the wing of that little cherub beside her just by grabbing a section of his wing and putting it over top. Now once you got her blended in there, she's still not matching up. What's wrong with her? What do you think? Well, what's her color like? Well, first off, take a look around. We've got some different color balance. Oddly enough, they're looking very warm over here and very cool over there. She's more towards this side, so I would kind of go more towards these colors. But also things like sharpness, noise. And the fact that she has a peacock growing out of her head is also a little bit disturbing. Actually, I'm going to deal with that first. What do we do about this bird here? What if I cloned it out? Now, again, we want things to be non-destructive, so I don't want to do it directly on this background layer in case the client comes back next week and says, where'd the peacock go? We're supposed to have the peacock in there. So I'm going to do it on a new transparent layer. Grab my clone stamp, make sure it's set to current and below, and I'm just going to sample the background and get rid of this peacock. And because she's floating over top, look at that. Look at how it just perfectly blends in behind her hair. And while I'm getting rid of the bird, I guess I can also fix that hole in the middle of the ceiling. So we'll call that one bird gone. So see what we can do about matching her up with the rest of the image. Hey guys, take a look at this. For changing the contrast behind her, like her blacks, I want to kind of, there's no pure blacks back here, it's kind of washed out gray. I want to do the same thing to her, but instead of using the RGB and kind of washing out the contrast a bit, there's a little bit of I feel like a bit of a reddish cast in those shadows. See that kind of reddish cast in there. So watch this. Instead of going to the RGB and pulling up that black point, I'm just going to go to the red channel. And look at what happens. It puts reddish into those shadows. So just a little hint of a reddish cast into those shadows, I think might match a bit better. Now, I also added a bit of noise to try to blend her in. One last thing I'm going to do on here, if she actually was leaning over the edge here, there would be some kind of light interaction below here. On the painting itself, there's not a whole lot in the way of shadows. You can see it's a little bit darker behind this kid. I don't know what this kid is doing, but he's not really casting much of a shadow. So to keep in with what they've got there, I'm just going to do a little bit of a shading underneath her. So I'm going to make a new transparent layer. Grab a paintbrush, fairly low opacity, like maybe 10% or so. And just a little bit of black, make sure it's a soft edge brush, hardness at 0. Oops. It actually ended up clipped to her. So I'm going to go below, make that new transparent layer, and just put a little bit of shading under there. Just a little bit of interaction of her with the light in the scene. That just helps make it look like she's actually there.